Hi everyone, this is Lin Bouthillier from linbouthillier.com. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of my ongoing series entitled Monogamous at 13. Today's discussion is about a really serious topic and as most of my videos are because I'm a trauma professional, but because we're getting close to Mother's Day and because uh, I, as many of you know, I have experienced within the last year the loss of my mother. And I wanted to do a discussion today that I thought might be helpful to my viewers because um, I'm going to be discussing the topic of when we are losing a family member and we have no choice, but we have to have some interactions with highly narcissistic family members or friends of the family or even possibly caregivers at a facility or a hospital, a care home, a nursing home, an assisted living, or even with care providers coming into your home where the family member is. And I'm going to try to do this discussion as sensitively and thoughtfully as possible, but I am very aware that I don't always get it right. And so I just want to tell you that I am sensitive to your feelings and I am understanding that this is not the easiest thing to listen to or to discuss. But if you've experienced having a loss of a loved one, no matter what relationship you held with them, if you went through the loss of a loved one and it was made more difficult because of someone else's behavioral problems, someone else's high narcissistic traits, their behavior of selfishness and total lack of self-awareness or really reduced self-awareness, or just straight up abusiveness, um, you've been hurt. If you've experienced that, you've gone through some trauma and it has been painful. I can say that unequivocally, the process of my mother's death was absolutely painful. It would have been with or without narcissistic personalities involved, for sure. But as I go through this discussion, you'll understand a little bit more of what I'm speaking about. So I have a grounding tool in my hand. As always, whenever I have a discussion with you, I have always utilized a grounding tool. This is one of my beautiful little holy stones that I love to use. And I strongly recommend, I invite you to use a grounding tool, anything that soothes you to hold in your hand to remind your brain that it is connected to a body. And this is what we refer to as trauma coaches. We refer to this as remaining embodied. And we are still connected to our body and our brain are connected. Our mind is connected to our environment. And this is one of the ways that we can feel that continuing sensation of remaining safe. So I love to recommend this for people because it is just so incredibly important and it's beautiful self-care. So I'm asking if you would please meet your system's needs throughout this discussion. And if at any time you begin to feel triggered, if you begin to feel unsafe, please shut off the video and just leave it for anyone else who wants to enjoy it. And just please go into your highest, best self-care. It's the best, safest thing that you can do is meet your needs and give your system exactly what it needs. All right, so I'm just going to give a little bit of backstory so you will understand what I'm speaking about. Some of you have become new viewers since I went through the process of losing my mother at age 87. It happened on May 2nd, 2024. And this entire process of losing my mother happened while I was completely estranged from my other 5 siblings. And the reason that that happened, without going into the whole long detailed explanation. I'll just give you the fast track version of it because it is important to the story. I became estranged from my family of origin, other than my mother and her, one of her siblings, her younger sister. Actually, both of her sisters are younger than her, but the younger of the two. And that was it for me, for family, for the rest of my life. I made that decision that as far as my family of origin, those were the only two people that I was going to maintain contact with. And I was my mother's healthcare proxy, and she was in an assisted living, and she remained at an assisted living until the day she died. So I was very, very thankful that she did not have to be moved to a skilled nursing facility. Um, she was hospitalized off and on, but she didn't have to remain in a hospital. And she was around people that she knew, and she was in familiar surroundings, and she was very, very grateful for that, and I was too. But my mom had Alzheimer's disease, and she was in late stage Alzheimer's, and she was completely reliant on other people at this point. She was no longer able to do much of anything for herself, but she still knew who all of her children were. She knew some of the names of the people that took care of her, and the ones whose names she couldn't remember, she certainly remembered their faces, and she knew who she liked and she knew who she did not care much for. And so she did have quite a bit of awareness still, even though it was late stage Alzheimer's. But I was full no contact with my siblings at that time because 3 years ago, when I told my family members that I was no longer with my husband because of the spousal abuse that had gone on for years and a long-term abusive relationship that started when I was a very young girl, hence the name of my series on YouTube, which you're watching right now. It was named Monogamous at 13 because I was recognizing how long my relationship had been severely toxic. And so when I confided to my family members, some of my siblings and in-laws, that this had gone on and that I needed help, I needed support, and I needed people to talk to, and I needed people to be able to understand that I was getting out of a marriage because I could not stay in that situation and remain healthy. It would have been impossible for me to be healthy and still be in the marriage. And so I did not get the response that I expected. And my family actually rallied around my abuser. They gave support to my abuser and blamed me. And when I say blamed me, what I mean is decided that I'm mentally ill. They just couldn't fathom that this person could be an abuser, so therefore I must be a liar and I must be mentally ill. And he had done his fair share to try to convince people that that was true. He went out of his way to do that. He was running a very, very elaborate smear campaign for a couple years. A lot of it without my knowledge. And so when my mom became so unwell at the later stage of her illness, and obviously Alzheimer's disease is a terminal illness. My mother had a terminal illness, but she was also comorbid with other physical conditions that were incompatible with life. She had a very severe, untreatable case of AFib, which means it was no longer respondent to medication. It was no longer controlled with medication. And she also had kidney failure. And she never needed dialysis, but we knew that it was going to get to a point where even that wouldn't help her. And with her late stage Alzheimer's, there were not going to be any heroic interventions because she had too many comorbidities to be able to be compatible with life. So I just want to move ahead to dealing now with the narcissistic personalities that were involved in the care of my mom, and especially in her remaining days, in just the final days of her life. Because when you're dealing with narcissistic personalities, um, they don't always have what we would consider to be stellar coping skills for any kind of end of life issues for anyone, even for themselves. And they can have very, very skewed ideas about what a death process is and what to expect. And I recognize that my siblings didn't have the same background of working in a hospital that I had. I worked, as I've mentioned in other videos, I worked on medical surgical floors. I worked in the CCU, cardiac ICU in a hospital. I worked in the intensive care unit in a hospital. I worked in what they call a, how do I say it? It's like an intervention area. It's not quite emergency, but you're not going up to a floor either. It's a medical intervention area where you're usually kept for observation overnight, usually not more than one night, but they did have that at the hospital where I worked. And the greatest bulk of the time that I was there, I did work in the emergency department. And so in an emergency department, you deal with death almost on a daily basis. Not the same thing as dealing with the death of a parent or a close family member or friend. It's not the same thing at all, but it is dealing with death. And I tried to keep in mind that my family members did not have that exposure to that. But things were so full of acrimony by the time it was my mother's final days that I was going in, I mean, for well over a year. It was a year and 3 months. I was going into my mom's care home almost every evening. And, I remember keeping track of it, and I had around 500 nights with her. And it was just absolutely a really beautiful time in my life where I was able to have that one-on-one time with her. And I was able to let go of a lot of the things that had been really painful for me as her daughter. And so I remember having a conversation with one of my siblings, and this sibling is very prone to being irate, very prone to being very short-tempered and snappish. And she said to me, when the time comes, I'm not going to be able to go there. This is when we still were on speaking terms. She said, I'm just simply not going to be able to take care of her. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to help. I'm just going to have to be somewhere else because my emotions aren't going to be able to take it. I'm not going to be able to handle it when her last day has arrived. So it's going to be a whole lot easier for me if I'm just away and I don't have any involvement in her care, because that's what would be easiest for me. Well, what does that do for the other family members? It makes it so that you have less and less choice about your own involvement. Yes, there is the possibility that you could leave it for the staff at the place to completely take care of. There's people who do that, but that just didn't seem at all like what I wanted to do. But when we're dealing with a family member who just says, you know what, that's unpleasant for me, and I'm exempt. I don't think I'm going to be involved in that at all. because it would cause me to have some emotions that I don't really want to feel. And I don't want to be put into an uncomfortable situation with my feelings and my emotions. So, sorry, it's all going to land on you. That right there is the formula for there to be lots of acrimony in a family system, to say the least. I mean, it's really an understatement. But what happens is the more people in a family system that do that, if it's a large family system, my family has, there are 6 siblings. I'm one of the 6 siblings. I don't mean to say that I have 6 siblings, there are 6 children. But when 1 or 2 or 3 of them decide, no, this isn't for me, then those duties fall on a couple of people or sometimes just one person. And the others kind of, if they feel like it, kind of breeze in and maybe bring something in with them to give to that ailing person or that dying person. They spend a little time and off they go. They might have spent an hour out of their month, maybe 2 hours out of their month, and it can really, really build resentment. Now, if somebody lives out of state or if somebody has other things that they're taking care of in their life, of course, there's no expectation that that person would be able to do more to help out in a situation like that. I believe that there needs to be some careful consideration of how we're going to view another person when they can or cannot be available to help in a situation like that, or to just to be supportive and to just be around, to be available to talk to, without judgment and without shaming and without, playing the tit for tat kind of games and keeping a tally, keeping a score of who does what and for how long and whether or not they're worthy to be seen as a valid person. All of this stuff is in the mix when you've got high narcissistic traits in the family. Well, another issue that comes up is when people who have high narcissistic traits do not understand something called privacy. And they don't understand something called autonomy. They don't understand dignity issues. And they don't want to. And so one of the things that I was starting to notice is the more my mother was having the need for someone to advocate for her, to protect her privacy, to make sure that she was not being put into an exploited situation, or to be viewed when she was not able to keep herself in a state of being properly dressed or covered or things like that, as happens with people in the end phases of their life. It can happen. And I'm noticing that there were people who were coming to visit who were kind of encouraged to go there and kind of invited there or even brought there by some family members who just really didn't understand that stuff at all. And I'll give you an example. One of my siblings has a sister-in-law who is what my mother used to refer to as just a giant pill. Difficult. Really, really, really difficult to be around person. Enormously narcissistic and very outspoken, very loud, very brash, very insensitive. And my mom asked me several times during the last year of her life, could you do something to make sure that that woman cannot get near me? Could you please do something? I don't want her in my room. I don't want to come out of the dining room and find her waiting for me in the lounge because she wants to spend the afternoon with me after lunch. I don't want that happening. I cannot stand to be near her. She's just like grating on my nerves constantly, and she is always bringing me stuff. This individual had a problem with hoarding, And she would bring some of the things that were from her deceased mother's hoards, because her deceased mother was also a hoarder. And she would bring these bags of things that my mother had absolutely zero use for. And she might just bring one or two of them and just place them at the foot of her bed and say, "Here, I brought you these things. These are for you, Eloise. I just want you to have them." And my mother would say, "Well, thank you, but you don't have to do that. Please don't feel that you need to bring me things." And she was trying to politely tell her, "I don't want your stuff." But the individual would not and could not take the hint, and she still continued to do it. Well, when somebody is that level of uncomfortable to be around, for a person who has late stage Alzheimer's or any kind of terminal illness or very, very painful condition or anything at all, if they're going through a lot of emotional changes or trying to process what's happening with them, dealing with end of life issues, this can be enormously stressful for a human being to have a highly narcissistic person in your presence, because every single moment is about them. Every single thing that they do is because they either want attention or they want control. They desire to manipulate. They want to be validated, or they want to invalidate you, or they want something from this action or from this situation. And power and control are always, always, always the lever that's in their hand. They're just always wanting to pull the lever of power and control. And I can tell you, there was another situation with not the Mother's Day when my mom passed away, because she passed just a few days before Mother's Day in 2024, but Mother's Day in 2023. There was a sibling in my family who has very, very high narcissistic traits, and they brought her a gift for Mother's Day, and it was actually a gift bag that had a few lovely items in it. And one of the items was a book from her particular religion, and it was a book that was a Bible study companion type handbook. And it was to try to, it said right on it, I mean, the material contained in the book and on the outside of the book was very, very clear. It was letting her know that you need to be saved before your demise, because if you're not getting into heaven. And you need to do the things that are in this book. And my mom asked me to read the cover of the book to her, the front and the back cover, because she couldn't read anymore. So this person gave her a Bible study book where this is her own child giving her this. And they were so unaware of their own mother's condition that they were just completely ignorant of the fact that their mom had lost her ability to read a couple years ago. She was coming in visiting regularly, but just could not see or could not process, couldn't accept, didn't want to see that her mother had lost her ability to read and write some time ago, years before. And so she wanted her to read this book and engage in Bible study at 88 years old, almost 88 years old, I'm sorry, 87. Sorry, she was 87. She wanted her to engage in Bible study so that she could be properly saved before her passing. And she gave her a book that said in clear print on the back of it that God thinks you are a filthy sinner and wants you to do these things in order to be able to come into the kingdom of heaven. And I could not understand how a person could give their mother for Mother's Day a book that tells her that she's a filthy sinner. I could not make sense of that. And when I read the back of the book, the front of the book and the back of the book to my mom, because she asked me to, my sibling had been there probably a couple hours before I got there. And that bag was on her, it's actually this table that's in front of me right now, was in her room. It was a table that I had purchased for her. But the gift bag for Mother's Day was on that table when I walked in. And nobody else was there, it was just me. And I recognized that she had been there probably a couple hours before. So she said, "What's this book about?" And I told her what it was, and she said, "Well, just read the front cover and the back cover to me, please, because this way I'll know whether or not I want you to read it to me." I mean, read. She was referring to whether or not I want to hear the book read to me. And I said, "Okay." So I read it to her, and she just sat there shaking her head, and she had a look on her face that was just sorrowful. It was just sorrow. And I said, "Ma, you don't have to keep this book." She said, "I'd like you to, when you leave today, I want you to take it out of here with you." She said, "I do not want that in here. I don't need a book that tells me I'm a filthy sinner." And I said, "You got it. That's no problem. I'll be so happy to take it out of here for you." And I didn't call that sibling. I knew it wouldn't do any good. Because when you're dealing with end of life issues, that's not going to help. Calling somebody up and saying, "What were you thinking?" Or, "Do you have any awareness that your mom can't read and write anymore because of her, Alzheimer's is, it's a very, very long-term, slow, severe brain injury. It's essentially what it is. Certain parts of the brain no longer work correctly, and then the function is deteriorating over time. It's very sad and tragic, but that's the truth. And so certain parts, my mom's, her frontal lobe, the part of your brain where executive function resides, was no longer online. It was not working properly. She did not have the ability to perform certain functions, such as reading and writing. And, the cerebral cortex of her brain was being affected. Her medulla was being affected. Her limbic system was being affected. Many parts of her brain, all four lobes of her brain, were being ravaged by this illness. And so the narcissism of people who come in to visit and they bring things that are absolutely inappropriate. And they make expectations and requests and demands on the individual who's getting ready to make their transition out of this world. And it can be so awkward and so difficult, so painful, so frustrating, off-putting, when you're dealing with the narcissistic traits of people who just haven't a clue. And they think they're helping, or they might begin to put demands on other family members. And I was starting to receive, like a year before my mother passed away, a year and 3 months before she passed, was when I had to sign her into hospice care, which was visiting hospice care where she lived. I didn't move her to a different facility. She stayed right where she was. And a group of hospice care team nurses and occupational therapists and individuals like that were coming to visit with her. I understand, well, that's not accurate. Occupational therapy is not necessarily done with patients that are in hospice, as far as I know, but they were people who had the skills of occupational therapists that were getting things for her, like adaptive flatware and making things for her so that she could have, her arm could have a weight on it so that she'd be able to feed herself more independently, things like that. But it's not the type of occupational therapy with the goal in mind of recovery. It's the goal in mind of helping to ease certain difficulties, to make them so that they are not as intrusive or limiting in the patient's comfort or their ability. So I want to fast forward a little bit to the day that my mom passed away. because, as I've said numerous times, I come from a narcissistic family system. I had one sibling who, when I was there, I was at the, I was called in the middle of the night a couple days before she passed and told it's time to be here all the time now. And instead of just all evening each night, it's time to be here because this is happening rapidly now. And I went when they called, and my family of origin were coming in, meeting my siblings, and some of their significant others were coming in. And as soon as they came in, I would just quietly stand up, get my bag, get my bottle of water, and leave. No conversation, no direct eye contact. Just as soon as the door opened and they start filing in, it's time for me to get up and leave. And I had to make a really difficult acceptance that my mom could pass while they're in the room and I'm not. I had to accept that that was a possibility. One thing that really helped me in this situation was that there is a really, really good custard stand down the street from where my mom was living. And it was the month of May, and the custard stand is open year round. And when they came in, I would just get in the car and drive down the street and go to the custard stand. And I'd get a little cup of custard and I would just sit in the sunshine and collect my thoughts and do what I needed to do to center myself. A couple times I kept going right past the custard stand and went back to my home, which is a 15 to 18 minute ride from there, and go let my dogs out, give them a little walk, feed them, give them some care, get them all settled, and go right back where I was. And the day that my mom passed, I was in that room. It was maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. I had been there since around 3 a.m. when I got that call. It was the day before she passed when I got the call to come in. And so I'd been with her for about a whole day. And then 9 o'clock in the morning, the door opened, and there's my string of siblings coming through the doorway, surrounding the bed, and I just got up and left. And when I came back, I left for about 2.5 hours. When I came back, I just needed to see whether or not they were still in the room, and I stopped at the desk to sign it in, and that receptionist said to me, "Oh, they just all left. They left like 20 minutes ago. They're all gone." And I said, "I wonder if they're coming back." She said, "I don't think so. I don't." She said, "I was chatting with them for a couple minutes. I don't think they're coming back." And I said, "Well, that's a little bit odd. I'm certain that the hospice nurses prepared them and told them that their mother is going to pass probably within a day." And she said, "Yeah, they do that. They let people know." And I said, "Well, they did with me, and they also understood that I've been in there every single day, and I could see the progression, and I had many conversations with them about being very, very well aware about what the signs of impending death are, and knew what to watch for. And keeping in mind, like I said at the beginning of this video, my siblings don't have that knowledge. They just didn't have those kinds of careers where they understood those things. And so when the time came, I was alone with her. And just a few hours before my mom passed, there was one visitor that came in. And it was the woman who is related to one of my siblings. She's an in-law of one of my siblings. And she's the one who had been bringing in the bags of stuff, the cast-off stuff that had been her deceased mother's things. And they were things that were absolutely 100% impossible for my mother to use in her condition. My mother could not crochet anymore. She didn't knit anymore. She couldn't read anymore. She didn't know how to, my mom wasn't making doll clothes. She wasn't doing that. She was bringing in patterns, bags of patterns for my mother to be able to make all kinds of crocheted items and leaving them in her room, like big, huge, overflowing bags of clutter that I would have to pick up and take out and get rid of. And so that woman decided to come in on my mother's last day. And it was about perhaps between noon and 1 p.m. I had stepped out just to take care of my own needs for a couple minutes, and when I came back, she was in the room. And like I said, this woman is highly, highly narcissistic, extremely high narcissistic traits, very, very, very difficult to be in the presence of her for more than 5 minutes, because she will just be like nails on a chalkboard to your nervous system. And so as soon as I walked in, she pulled up a chair. There were folding chairs in my mom's room, and she pulled one right over next to me, and I was seated next to the bed where my thigh was right against the mattress, and my hand was on my mother's hand. And there's, the cool cloth on her forehead, and she's having, chain stokes breathing. She is actively dying. And this person is talking to me, blah, 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 constantly, just constant chatter. Well, is that light blue car out there in the parking lot your car? How old is it? How many miles are on it? Where'd you go for lunch? Did you have lunch? Do you want to go get lunch? I'll go with you. And this is the classic example of, are you even remotely able to read a room? Are you able to see what's happening right here? And so I was trying to be polite, and I said, well, actually, I'm just really focused on my mother right now. As you can see, she's making her transition into the next world. And I really appreciate, I was giving a real strong hint, I really appreciate you coming to say goodbye to her. And I hope that you have a really nice day. And that went right over her head. And so she pulls her chair closer to me and she says, well, I just want to know what's new with you. How are you doing? And tell me something good and positive that's going on in your life. I said, it's not the time for that right now. I'm sorry, I'm not having that discussion with you. I'm not getting into the details of my life. Could you please honor the fact that my mom is passing and I need some privacy? Could you please do that for me? And she just shook her head and she said, I'm not leaving until you give me some good news. I want to hear about what's happening in your life. And I actually had to say to her, look at the woman in the bed. What do you see? And she got rather quiet. And I said, these are my final moments with my mother. You're stepping all over them. I'm asking you to go through that door and don't come back. Thank you for coming by. I appreciate it. Please go through that door and do not come back. And she made comments to me that I was being unreasonable with her. And I didn't care. That did not hurt my feelings at all. It just absolutely did not hurt my feelings whatsoever. But I know that my mother could hear everything that was happening in that room. I know that my mother had to have been waiting for me to get her through that door. And I knew that my mom was not going to let go and go back to creation with somebody in the room who was an absolute fucking irritant. Somebody who was so obnoxious and obtuse and completely unself-aware, utterly unspiritual. A person who could not understand that this is a holy moment. Yeah, I'm angry right now. I'm really feeling my anger. right now. This person could not understand, I'm just going to call it what it was, that they're pretty much dropping trow and taking a giant steaming shit on somebody else's last moments of their life. And not giving a fuck that that's what they're doing. It's true. So it felt to me really appropriate as one of the last things that I ever did for my mother while she was still breathing, while she was still with me, was to advocate for her, which I probably should have done it an hour to an hour and a half before I did it. I let it go on too long. But I don't beat myself up for that. I was in a state of grief, and I have so much compassion for myself for not acting the way on the inside I would love to have acted. I just got to the point where I said, okay, this has gone on long enough. This is stopping right now. And got her out of there. And my mom ended up passing at 25 minutes after 4 in the afternoon. I was the only person who was with her. And we had had a discussion about a week before. And she told me, I think I'm going to be going to be with your father soon. Was how she put it. And I said, I think you might be right. And I think that your spirit knows what it wants. And I'm fully prepared for no matter what happens. It's perfectly fine with me because your process and your life is yours. I don't get a say. If it was up to me, of course I'd keep you here with me forever. But I understand that that's not possible. So when it's time for you to leave and go to, to complete your journey, I don't want you to do it with thinking of what my needs are. I want you to do what your spirit needs and what your body needs. And she just kind of nodded like, yeah, that's right. And so we had this discussion where I said, I don't feel like it's really right for me to ask anything of you at a time like this. But I was just wondering if there's any way, and you don't have to answer it now, but if there's any way that you could send me a sign that you're still around me, I would absolutely love it. And I was shocked what happened. She turned her head and looked right at me and she said, well, what do you want? What kind of sign? What would you like? And I was floored. The clarity, the precision, her awareness, her eyes looking right into mine and saying, well, what would you like me to give you? What kind of sign would you like that I'm around you? Because, yeah, I'll do that. And I'm just like, I love bluebirds, Mom. Where I live, there aren't many bluebirds around. I've been trying to attract them for years. I don't get them in my yard. I have to go to a park near my home to look at bluebirds. But I sure would love it if there's any way, if you had the power to do it, if you had the ability to do it, if you wanted to make my heart be just thrilled, I would love it so much if you would just send me one or two bluebirds to come and visit me sometimes. And she just nodded and she said, sure. Yeah, I'd love to send you bluebirds. That's really nice. I like that. Yeah, I'll send you bluebirds. And they said, okay, that's great. And I said, I have something else I'd like to ask you for. If there's any possible way, I said, I just really, really would love to be the person who's with you when you leave. And if it could be just you and me, that would mean the world to me, but I know I don't have the right to ask for that. And she just kind of made a smirky smile and she said, well, we'll see. She thought it was a little bit funny. We were in the bathroom. I was getting her washed up. And she said, well, we'll see. So that's how it happened. And it took me, I'm not kidding you, it took me months to put this together. She passed May 2nd of 2024. And in December and January, December 2024, January 2025, I kept on seeing it in the front room that I'm in right now in my house. I kept on seeing right outside, there's a window right at my desk. And I kept seeing bluebirds out there in the middle of winter. And they appeared hungry. And so what am I doing? I'm getting stuff like rolled oats and chopped raisins and suet and mealworms and all this stuff out there, putting it on a tray, trying different feeders out there, trying to feed these birds. And it's the weather side of the house where the wind is just slamming into the bush that they're sitting in. And it doesn't occur to me, the bluebirds are here. I'm so fixated on, oh, they look hungry. Where did they come from? We've never had bluebirds like this around here. It was not sinking into my little brain that the bluebirds that I had requested were arriving, and they came in the winter. And it literally did not sink in to me. Caller. Sorry about that. It did not sink in with me for months. I can tell you, last night, I was sitting up in my bed, and it was about maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was going through my photographs because I wanted to look at a couple photographs of her. And I didn't realize all this time that I had made a video. I had made, I think, 6 videos of her during her last day. The last video that I made of her was at 4:20 p.m. on May 2nd, 2024. She died at 4:25 p.m. that day. Literally 5 minutes before she passed, I have video of just her breathing. And I knew that she was leaving. And I felt sad when I watched this video because I felt disappointed with myself that I didn't capture her last breath on video. Doesn't really matter that much whether or not I have that or not, but I just felt a disappointment inside that I made that video and I did not I didn't stay with it for a couple more minutes. The other thing about the videos is that I could not believe it. When one of them that I'm watching is about 6 minutes long, and it's me asking her again to send me bluebirds. I had for this past year, I've had no recollection of that moment. Absolutely no recollection of telling her every thought that I wanted to share with her, thanking her, sharing my gratitude with her, letting her know that every single bad moment that we had between us was forgiven. Sorry. And that there was nothing but peace and love. But I was still letting her know that I was totally open to her coming around me whenever she could spare the time, whenever she could pull the energy together to do that, because I don't know from the other side what is involved in that. But I've been told by various people that it takes quite a bit of energy for a person to come through into this time space to be with us for a moment. It's easier for them to send us little signs that they're nearby rather than to appear themselves. So sorry for the sounds. So yes, the highly narcissistic people were not there. They were not present. And I feel like I got the biggest gift in the world that this journey with her that was deeply, deeply meaningful and had been a daily routine for such a long time was coming to its end. And yeah, there were some people who came and they intruded in the most obnoxious ways. I left most of it out of this video. There was a whole lot more that I'm not saying than what I am sharing. But I only wanted to use those couple examples because some of you that will really resonate with you, and we can be left with the feeling afterwards like, why the hell didn't I kick them out? Or why didn't I get up and walk out when something like that was happening? Why did I just sit there and listen to it and let that reverberate in my system? The answer is because we are traumatized at a time like that. When we're going through that level of trauma, what's the first thing that checks out? The prefrontal cortex, right behind our forehead. Our rational thought, our clear thinking, our executive function, and a lot of our processing get really, really, really reduced at a time like that. So we can let go of any mistakes or feelings that we let ourselves down in any way during a time like that. We can let go of that because we didn't have the control that we wished that we could have had. It just doesn't exist at a time like that. Not one of us is fully together at a time when these things are occurring. But when we have these things that happen later on, way later on, I don't know what made me want to watch the videos last night, but it was the first time I watched them since I made them. I was aware that I made videos, but I couldn't have told you 6 weeks ago or a week ago or 10 days ago what was the content of those videos. I literally couldn't remember because I was not in my right mind when I made them. I was in grief. I was traumatized. And here I am, a year later, hearing my voice as the camera's on my mom, and I'm just lovingly reminding her, remember, send me the bluebirds. I'll know it's you. And then how silly of me that she sent them, and I'm just like, oh, there's bluebirds out there. And it occurred to me, because of that disconnect, that's okay. If you have disconnects like that in your grief process, that's okay. And especially if you were dealing with highly narcissistic people who are abusive, people who are insensitive, people who are not attuned, people who are not filled with gratitude, people who are not love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency, people who hurt other people. It's not easy to function through these really, really, really big life moments when someone's coming into the world and when somebody's leaving the world. Seems to be a really tricky time for narcissistic people to be able to compose themselves and conduct themselves with any care or consideration towards other people. So we can't change them. There's not a whole lot we can do differently. But we can always, always go to what I speak about at the end of every video, which is, what on earth can we do about it? Self-care. Self-care is almost, well, to me, it's the answer to almost everything. I can't think of much of anything that can't be helped with phenomenal, wonderful, generous, loving self-care. Compassion for the self is right at the top of the list. I don't have to have compassion for people who hurt me. I don't have to have compassion for the person who came into my mother's room and acted like an absolute ass while a person was dying. A person she supposedly cared about? Not really. I don't have to worry about that person. I don't have to caretake that person. I don't have to feel guilt or shame about seeing that person to the door. I didn't swear at them. I didn't curse at them. I didn't shame them. I didn't do it. I just said, this is just not, it's not the time for this. You need to go through that door. And I did what was appropriate. I did what I needed to do, and that's a lot to be proud of. And if you've had to do things like that, if you've been carrying guilt or shame for that, please, please have compassion for yourself and understand you were dealing with a person who did not care about your grief or your process or your privacy or your dignity or the loved one's dignity or what your needs were at that time. They do not care. You don't have to caretake them. You were the person who needed care. You didn't get it. Or you may have gotten underfed with the type and amount of care that you needed. But you can take care of yourself now. You didn't get it wrong. You absolutely didn't get it wrong. If you saw someone to the door, you kicked somebody out, or even if you lost your shribbon at them, you still didn't get it wrong. Because when we're traumatized and we're in grief, we don't always have to get it right. And that's okay. This has been a really good discussion. I hope it has helped you to understand some of the dynamics of letting go in a complicated situation where there are personalities involved that are quite literally painful to be around, to be exposed to. People who hurt people. They're here, and we just do the best we can. Honor ourselves, honor our loved one, and take excellent care of ourselves. And then, over time, we start to recognize that yes, the healing is here. The healing did come. The healing that I asked for. The ways that that person comes around me, all of it it's real. It's here. It helps me recover. It helps me know that I'm still connected. There's still connection. And trauma recovery always involves connection and involves reconnection. We don't have to reconnect to people who harm us. It's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about reconnection to self, reconnection to the environment, reconnection to others, reconnection to the world, reconnection to community, reconnection to the universe, reconnection to source. It's all good stuff. So thank you for being here with me today. I hope this discussion has helped you. And if you have not already, please like, subscribe, share, put comments in the comments section, hit the notification bell, and tell your friends about my channel. If you think that someone that you know is struggling with some trauma, introduce them to my channel. It might help them. I would really, really appreciate it. If you're interested in becoming a client for Certified Trauma Recovery Coaching, please reach out by phone, 716-994-3052, or you can reach me at my email, which is lin@linbouthillier.com, and my website is linbouthillier.com. You can just go to the description page for my channel, and all of that information is there for you. So I really look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you understand that self-care is never, ever selfish. It's essential to trauma recovery, and that you are infinitely worthy of your own trauma recovery. Have the very best day, everyone. See you next time.